A single deal could make you a millionaire overnight or destroy entire cities. Laws were bought. Workers died in strikes like Homestead in 1892, and the men behind it all became gods of money. This wasn't just capitalism. It was war. And what they built in the shadows? The corporate trusts they formed then are why companies today still dodge accountability while controlling your paycheck. In February 1901, J.P. Morgan merged Carnegie's steel empire to create U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation. That handshake didn't just reshape business, it redesigned how labor and capital work forever. The Gilded Age wasn't history, it was the blueprint. So here's the question. If the game was rigged from the start, why are you still playing by their rules? What happened in that room changed everything. One room, 7 men. A handshake that controls every dollar you'll ever earn. January 1901, Manhattan. The most powerful men in America locked themselves inside J.P. Morgan's private library. No records, no witnesses, no accountability. What they created in 72 hours wasn't just a business deal. It was a financial weapon aimed directly at your future. Andrew Carnegie walked in owning the biggest steel empire on Earth. J.P. Morgan controlled half the railroads in America. Together, they had one mission: build a system where you work harder while they get richer. The meeting was so secret that historians still don't know exactly what was said, but they know what came out. The world's first billion-dollar corporation, U.S. Steel, worth $1.4 billion in 1901. That's like $50 billion today. Here's what they don't want you to understand. This wasn't about making steel. It was about making workers pay for their own chains. They invented something called corporate structure. Sounds boring, right? Wrong. This structure separated ownership from accountability forever. Before this meeting, if you owned a business and it hurt people, you faced consequences. After this meeting, the corporation takes the blame. The owners walk free with the money. Every job you've ever had uses their exact blueprint. CEO gets millions, company goes bankrupt, workers get fired, but the CEO keeps the money because the corporation failed, not the person. See how that works? They built a legal shield that protects wealth while destroying lives, and you're funding it every time you clock in. The genius part? They made it look like capitalism free markets competition. Merit-based success, pure lies. What they actually created was systematic control disguised as economic freedom. Morgan didn't just want Carnegie's steel company. He wanted to own the system that creates all companies. The meeting wasn't about one deal. It was about designing the rules of money itself. Think your 401k makes you an owner? Think company stock gives you a voice? That's exactly what they planned. Give workers tiny pieces of ownership so they feel included while the real wealth flows straight up. Your retirement account might have a few thousand shares. The founding families still control millions. You get crumbs, they get the whole cake. But here's the part that should terrify you. The legal framework they built in that room makes workers pay for their own exploitation. Every time you buy products from corporations, you're funding the system designed to keep you poor. Every time you work for a corporation, you're building wealth for people who will never know your name. Every time you invest in corporate stock, you're betting on a game rigged against you from day one. The corporate structure they invented has one rule: socialize the losses, privatize the gains. When corporations succeed, owners get rich. When corporations fail, taxpayers pay the bill. Remember 2008? Banks got bailouts. Homeowners got foreclosed. That's not a bug in the system. That's the feature they designed. U.S. Steel was just the beginning. Once they proved the model worked, every industry copied it. Oil, railroads, banking, manufacturing, all using the same structure that separates you from your labor while protecting the people who profit from your work. The corporate framework they built in 1901 now controls every aspect of your financial life. What they created wasn't just a company. It was a machine that turns human effort into concentrated wealth. A machine that runs on your labor but pays you the minimum necessary to keep running. A machine designed to last forever because it feeds on the one thing that never runs out: people who need jobs to survive. The secret meeting ended with a handshake worth more than entire countries. But the meeting was just the beginning. The real weapon they created was something far more sinister. They found a way to make you grateful for your own financial prison, and you're still falling for it. Carnegie and Rockefeller discovered something banks don't want you to know. The fastest way to get rich wasn't just exploiting workers. It was making workers fund their own exploitation. While you celebrate your company benefits package, they're laughing all the way to generational wealth. The legal trick they used looks innocent on paper, but it's the exact reason you're living paycheck to paycheck. While their great-great-grandchildren never work a day in their lives, they created something called corporate personhood. Companies got all the rights of people but none of the consequences. Think about that for a second. Your boss can fire you for being late once, but when a corporation poisons a river, nobody goes to jail. This corporate shield made them legally untouchable. They could take your labor, steal your money, destroy your future, and hide behind a piece of paper that says the corporation did it, not them. Like playing tag with an invisible friend who never gets caught. Except this invisible friend controls your rent money. Here's where it gets twisted. They made workers believe they were partners in the system. Company stock, profit sharing, employee benefits. Sounds great, right? Wrong. While you're excited about your 3% company match, the real wealth flows straight up to people who own millions of shares. You get a trickle, they get Niagara Falls. Every time you clock in, you're participating in their wealth extraction machine. Every time you buy company stock thinking you're building wealth, you're funding the system designed to keep you broke. Every time you show company loyalty, you're working for free while shareholders cash checks. The house always wins because they own the house, the casino, and the parking lot. Standard Oil controlled 90% of oil refining by the 1880s. Not through better products, through better lawyers. Rockefeller didn't just want to sell oil. He wanted to own the legal framework that made selling oil possible. While workers fought for basic safety, he was building legal moats around his money that still protect oil companies today. The loophole gets worse. They structured corporations so economic crashes destroy worker wealth while protecting owner wealth. Remember 2008? Regular people lost homes. Banks got bailouts. That's not an accident. That's the system working exactly as designed. When times get tough, corporations fire workers and keep profits. When times get really tough, taxpayers bail out corporations while workers lose everything. Carnegie talked about philanthropy while paying workers starvation wages. He gave away libraries while his employees worked 12-hour days in death traps. Classic misdirection. Look at the shiny charity over here while we pick your pocket over there. Modern billionaires use the same playbook. Announce a climate initiative while their companies pump poison into your water. Corporate personhood means companies can live forever, but face no real punishment. A human who kills someone goes to prison. A corporation that kills someone pays a fine and keeps operating. The corporation might pay millions in penalties, but the executives who made the deadly decisions, they retire to beach houses bought with the money they made before anyone died. This legal separation between ownership and accountability created something unprecedented in human history. A class of people who could profit from destruction without facing consequences. They built wealth by externalizing costs onto workers and communities while internalizing profits for shareholders. By 1890, 92% of American families lived below the poverty line, while a handful of industrialists lived like kings. That wasn't market failure, that was market success. The system worked perfectly for the people who designed it. Corporate personhood allowed them to concentrate wealth while spreading blame. Every corporation you work for today uses this exact structure. CEO makes millions, company goes bankrupt, workers get fired, but the wealth extraction already happened. The executives already cashed out. The shareholders already moved their money. You're left holding the bag. But this legal loophole was just the foundation for an even more devastating financial weapon. They invented a financial weapon, so powerful that banks still use it to keep entire families trapped for generations. The railroad barons didn't just build tracks. They built the debt-based economy that keeps you borrowing money you'll never truly own. What looks like normal banking today started as a deliberate strategy to make sure workers could never accumulate real wealth. Railroad companies needed massive capital to build tracks across America, so they invented something that sounds helpful, but was actually designed to drain your bank account forever. Corporate bonds, mortgages, installment plans. These weren't innovations to help people. They were wealth extraction machines disguised as financial services. Here's the twisted part. They created the first large-scale credit systems with a mathematical trap built right in. The debt was designed to grow faster than your ability to pay it off, like a financial quicksand that pulls you deeper the harder you struggle. Every payment you make feels like progress, but the balance keeps growing. The railroad companies promised high returns to investors while loading workers with debt that never ended. They offered credit to attract workers and settlers to the West. Sounded generous, right? Wrong. The terms were structured to ensure workers stayed trapped in cycles of debt. Land purchases, goods, equipment, all available on credit, all designed to keep you paying forever. The mathematical structures of these early mortgages were rigged from day one. Interest rates and repayment schedules maximized profits for lenders while minimizing the chance borrowers would ever own anything outright. The fine print concealed the true cost of borrowing. Workers thought they were building wealth. They were actually funding the expansion of the system designed to exploit them. Every mortgage you've ever signed uses these same principles. Every car loan follows their blueprint. Every credit card applies their mathematical formulas. The numbers look different. The trap works exactly the same. Monthly payments that never seem to reduce the balance. Interest that compounds faster than your payments can keep up. The system worked by giving workers just enough credit to feel middle class. A house, a wagon, some land. But the debt ensured they'd never actually own any of it. Miss a few payments? Everything gets taken back. The railroad companies get to resell the same property to the next desperate worker. Like a financial conveyor belt that never stops moving money from your pocket to theirs. Railroad workers felt like they were participating in the American dream. White picket fence, land ownership, financial progress, pure illusion. They were actually trapped in America's first debt economy, working harder to pay for things they'd never truly possess. The harder they worked, the richer the railroad barons became. The bonds these companies issued promised fixed interest payments, regardless of company performance. When revenues fell, workers got fired. When companies failed, bondholders still got paid. The mathematical structure protected investor wealth while destroying worker security. Sound familiar? That's your 401k in a nutshell. This debt-driven model created financial instability that still rocks the economy today. Companies became vulnerable to economic downturns because they carried massive debt loads. But here's the key. When railroad companies went bankrupt, the owners already extracted their wealth. Workers lost jobs. Investors lost money. Owners kept mansions. The railroad barons turned debt into a permanent feature of American life. Before them, people saved money and bought things with cash. After them, people borrowed money and paid interest forever. They transformed an economy based on ownership into an economy based on monthly payments. The trap was perfect. Workers felt like they were building wealth, while actually funding the expansion of the system that exploited them. Every debt payment strengthened the financial infrastructure designed to keep them paying, like feeding a monster that grows stronger with every bite. The modern debt-based credit system designed to extract wealth through compound interest came straight from railroad financing schemes. They proved that debt could be more profitable than ownership, more reliable than wages, more permanent than any other form of wealth extraction. But the debt trap was just one part of a much larger plan to redesign society itself. The corporate structure they designed created permanent separation between those who own and those who work. They built corporations like medieval kingdoms. Shareholders became nobility, executives became knights, workers became peasants with no path to advancement. The brilliant part? They made it look like merit-based capitalism, while actually creating inherited wealth dynasties that persist today. Standard Oil controlled 90% of the oil market by the 1880s, not through better products, through better monopoly tactics. Rockefeller used horizontal integration to buy out competing refineries and vertical integration to control every aspect of production from oil extraction to distribution. Standard Oil directors went on to control 30 subsidiary companies, creating ownership dynasties that concentrated wealth across multiple industries. He didn't just want market share, he wanted to own the entire system that creates market share. Carnegie did the same thing with steel. Vertical integration let him control the supply chain from raw material, extraction to steel production and distribution. This allowed Carnegie to produce steel at lower costs than competitors, driving them out of business. While positioning himself as a philanthropist funding libraries and education, his business tactics were ruthlessly aggressive. The Homestead Strike of 1892 showed workers exactly what Carnegie's philanthropy was worth when it conflicted with profits. The Standard Oil Trust, established in 1882, became the perfect example of how legal innovation could sidestep anti-monopoly laws. The trust structure enabled Rockefeller and his partners to hold stock of multiple companies under a central board of trustees. They could operate as one giant corporation without technically violating anti-monopoly laws. U.S. Steel's 1920s, corporate bylaws restricted share ownership to insiders, ensuring that real control stayed within elite families, while giving workers the illusion of participation through small stockholdings. Company towns like Homestead and Pullman proved how completely they could control workers' lives. Trustees wielded power over workers' housing, wages, and even where they could shop. Workers paid rent to the company, bought groceries from company stores, and sent their children to company schools. Every dollar a worker earned flowed back to the company through mandatory expenses. The corporate caste system wasn't just about workplace hierarchy, it was about total life control. They structured corporate ownership so your 401k might own a few shares of Apple, while founding families still control millions. You get invited to the shareholders' meeting, they decide what gets voted on. You feel like an owner, they act like gods. Every corporate hierarchy you've ever worked in uses the same power structure they designed to prevent workers from accessing real ownership. Carnegie often positioned himself as a philanthropist while paying workers starvation wages. He gave away libraries while his employees worked 12-hour days in death traps. Classic misdirection. Look at the shiny charity over here, while we rob you over there. Modern billionaires copied this playbook word for word. The corporate caste system they created has one rule: capital owners stay on top, labor providers stay on bottom. No switching sides, no climbing ladders, no earning your way up. The game board was designed to prevent social mobility while creating the illusion of opportunity. But the most insidious part wasn't just keeping workers trapped at the bottom. They engineered a system where the people running these corporations could extract maximum wealth regardless of whether the companies succeeded or failed completely. That principle was simple but devastating: replace ownership with debt dependency. Everything you think you know about money is a lie they designed to keep you borrowing, spending, and never actually owning anything. Your paycheck-to-paycheck lifestyle isn't a personal failure. It's the intended outcome of a system engineered 120 years ago. Before the monopolies took over, Americans saved money and bought things with cash. Then the robber barons realized something twisted. An economy based on ownership was terrible for wealth extraction. But an economy based on debt? Pure gold. Farmers got trapped first through high-interest mortgage schemes called tickler notes. These predatory loans promised low initial payments that exploded after a few years, forcing farmers to refinance repeatedly or lose their land. By 1906, mortgages became the largest single financial asset in rural banks, accounting for 40% of all loans. The system worked perfectly. Banks collected interest forever, while farmers worked themselves to death, paying for land they'd never truly own. The monopolies created artificial scarcity and inflated prices, while simultaneously offering credit to purchase what workers could no longer afford with cash, like jacking up the price of water during a drought, then selling you a payment plan for the water you desperately need. Carnegie Steel controlled steel prices, Standard Oil controlled energy costs, J.P. Morgan controlled the banks that financed everything else. They could inflate prices on one end while offering credit on the other end. The Panic of 1893 proved how perfectly this debt system worked for wealth extraction. Speculative railroad investments drove banks into insolvency, wiping out depositors across the country. But the railroad barons who structured these debt-fueled schemes had already extracted their wealth before the collapse hit. Workers lost savings, banks failed, the architects of the debt economy kept their mansions. They designed the system so that economic growth depends on consumer debt, making your financial struggle essential to their wealth accumulation. When you pay rent instead of owning, landlords get richer. When you make payments instead of saving for cash purchases, banks get richer. Your struggle is their success. The debt economy ensures that your labor generates wealth for owners, while keeping you financially dependent and unable to build generational wealth. You work 40 hours per week. Half your labor pays your actual expenses. Half pays interest on debt for things previous generations bought with cash. Half your life funds their wealth accumulation machine. The mathematical genius of this scam is that debt payments never end. Mortgages stretch across decades. Credit cards compound monthly. Student loans follow you to the grave. Every payment extracts wealth from your future to feed their present. They built a machine designed to run on your financial desperation. But here's what they never expected. Once you understand how their machine works, you can choose to stop feeding it. The system they built wasn't invincible. History proves that corporate overreach can be defeated when people understand what they're fighting against. The Progressive Era showed exactly how to beat monopolies using the tools they never expected: public pressure and legal reform. The 1911 Supreme Court decision broke up Standard Oil after years of public outcry and legal battles. Rockefeller's empire seemed untouchable until informed citizens demanded action. The Sherman Act had been on the books since 1890, but it took organized public will to force enforcement. One court decision shattered the most powerful monopoly in American history. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 came from the same formula: corporate abuse, public awareness, legal action, real change. When people understood how companies were poisoning their food for profit, they demanded protection. Congress had no choice but to act. The robber barons built their system assuming workers would never understand how it worked. They were wrong then, they're wrong now. Craving more deep-dive financial investigations? You're in the right place. Smash that like button if this video gave you something to think about. Subscribe now so you never miss a story that challenges the system and empowers your financial future. Share this with someone who needs to hear the truth. Your support fuels the research, the editing, and every story we uncover. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your voice helps shape what comes next.